On the bustling streets of Chicago, where skyscrapers seemed to touch the sky and the lights never dimmed, lived Sarah Thompson, a 19-year-old whose beauty contrasted sharply with the harshness of her life. With large brown eyes that reflected a mixture of innocence and determination, Sarah faced the stark reality of extreme poverty every day in the city that never sleeps. The small apartment she shared with her older sister, Lisa, 25, was a constant reminder of their limitations. The peeling walls, worn-out furniture, and the constant drip from the broken pipes formed the backdrop of her existence. But for Sarah, this place was her home, the only refuge she knew in a world that seemed to conspire against her. Every morning, Sarah woke up before dawn, put on her worn uniform, and headed to the diner where she worked as a waitress. The meager tips and minimum wage barely covered basics. Necessities, but she clung to that job with everything she had, determined to forge a better future. Lisa, on the other hand, led a very different life. The older sister, with her mature beauty and defiant attitude, had chosen a path that Sarah refused to follow: prostitution. Every night, Lisa transformed herself, changing her worn clothes for provocative dresses and high heels, going out into the streets to sell her body to the highest bidder. "Sarah, look at yourself," Lisa would often say, her voice tinged with bitterness and resignation. "You work like a slave for pennies, while I can earn in one night what you make in a month. Don't you realize you're wasting your youth and beauty?" But Sarah always responded with the same determination. "I'd rather earn little with dignity than sell my soul, Lisa. There has to be another way to get ahead." This difference of opinion created constant tension between the sisters. Lisa saw Sarah as naive, refusing to face reality, while Sarah couldn't help but judge her older sister's decisions. Despite everything, an unbreakable bond united them. They were all they had in the world one night, after a particularly exhausting shift at the diner. Sarah returned home to find Lisa crying on the rickety sofa. Her smeared makeup and a bruise forming on her cheek told a story that Sarah feared to hear. "What happened, Lisa?" Sarah asked, sitting next to her sister and taking her hand between sobs. Lisa explained, "A client got violent. He didn't want to pay. I had to run away." "Sarah, I'm scared. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this." Sarah's heart clenched seeing her sister, always so strong and defiant, reduced to a bundle of nerves and tears. At that moment, she realized that despite their differences, they were both trapped in the same cage of poverty and desperation. "We're going to get through this together, Lisa," Sarah promised, hugging her sister. "We'll find a way. There has to be something better out there for us." But while comforting Lisa, a feeling of desperation took hold of Sarah. The bills were piling up, the rent was overdue, and the job at the diner barely covered their most basic needs. The pressure of their situation began to crush her, and for the first time Sarah wondered if there really was a better future waiting for them. That night, while Lisa slept, Sarah sat on the windowsill, looking at the city lights. Chicago, with all its grandeur and opportunities, seemed to mock her. How could a city offer so much and at the same time so little? With tears in her eyes, Sarah made a silent promise to the barely visible stars in the polluted sky. She would find a way to change their lives, no matter what it took. What Sarah didn't know was that fate was about to intervene in the most unexpected way, putting in her path a man who would change the course of her life forever, an encounter that would take her to the edge of the abyss, but could also be the key to escaping the misery that surrounded her. The days passed one after another, each more difficult than the last, for Sarah and Lisa. The overdue rent had become a constant threat of eviction, and the empty refrigerator was a cruel reminder of their precarious situation. Sarah had increased her hours at the diner, working double shifts that left her exhausted. But even this wasn't enough to keep the Thompson sisters afloat. One particularly cold autumn night, Sarah returned home after an exhausting shift to find a note from Lisa. "I can't take this. Any more I've gone out to look for money. Don't wait up for me." Sarah's heart sank, knowing exactly what that meant. Desperate and not knowing what else to do, Sarah made a decision that would change the course of her life. With trembling hands, she put on the prettiest dress she owned, a birthday gift from Lisa the year before, and went out into the streets of Chicago, determined to find a solution, any solution, to their financial problems. The neon lights of nightclubs and bars illuminated the sidewalks, creating a world of shadows and empty promises. Sarah walked aimlessly, her heart pounding in her chest, not really knowing what she was looking for or what she was willing to do. That's when she saw him, a tall, well-dressed man, about 32 years old, coming out of a luxurious restaurant. There was something about his bearing, the way his eyes scanned the street with a mixture of curiosity and loneliness, that caught Sarah's attention. Without thinking twice, she approached him. "Excuse me, sir," she said with a trembling voice. "Do you have a light?" The man turned to her, surprised. His eyes, a deep blue, met Sarah's, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "I don't smoke," he replied in a soft, educated voice, "but I can offer you something better. Would you like to have a coffee? It's cold out here." Sarah hesitated for a moment, but desperation overcame fear. She nodded and followed the stranger to a nearby cafe. The man introduced himself as Michael Harrison, a successful real estate businessman. As they talked, Sarah found herself captivated by his charisma and apparent kindness. Michael told her about his life, his travels, his success, and Sarah allowed herself to dream for a moment of a different life. "And you, Sarah?" Michael asked with genuine interest. "What brings you to the streets on a night like this?" The question fell like a bucket of cold water on Sarah. The reality of her situation hit her hard again, and before she could contain herself, tears began to fall down her cheeks. Between sobs, Sarah told Michael everything: the poverty, the daily struggle, her sister, the constant fear of eviction. She told him about her broken dreams and the desperation that had led her to the streets that night. Michael listened in silence, his eyes full of an emotion that Sarah couldn't decipher. When she finished speaking, he took her hand across the table. "Sarah," he said softly, "maybe I can help you, but I need to know, are you a virgin?" The question took Sarah by surprise. She blushed intensely but nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I am." Michael's eyes shone with a mixture of desire and something darker that Sarah couldn't identify. "Then I have a proposal for you," he said, leaning forward. "One night with me and all your financial problems will disappear. You'll be able to pay the rent, buy food, even save for the future. One night, Sarah, and your life will change forever." Sarah felt the world stop around her. Michael's proposal resonated in her ears, tempting and terrifying at the same time. On one hand, it represented everything she had sworn never to do, the path she had seen destroy her sister. On the other, it offered a quick way out of the misery that consumed them. With her heart racing and her mind clouded by confusion, Sarah made the decision that would alter the course of her life and that of everyone around her. "I accept," she said in a barely audible whisper. Sealing her fate with those two simple words, Michael smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and stood up, offering her his hand. "Let's go then," he said, guiding her out of the cafe into the Chicago night, a night that neither of them would ever forget. As they walked towards the luxury hotel where Michael was staying, Sarah felt that each step took her further away from the person she believed herself to be. The city around her seemed to watch her, silently judging as she entered a world she wasn't sure she could escape from. The elevator rose silently to the penthouse of the luxury hotel, and with each passing floor, Sarah's heart beat faster. Michael was beside her, his imposing presence filling the small space. The silence between them was heavy, loaded with expectations and fear. When the doors opened, revealing an elegantly decorated hallway, Sarah felt her legs turn to jelly. Michael gently guided her towards the suite, his hand on the small of her back, touch that felt both comforting and threatening. The room was larger and more luxurious than Sarah had ever imagined. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, softly illuminating the designer furniture and works of art adorning the walls. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, The lights of Chicago shimmered like a sea of stars. "Do you like it?" Michael asked, his voice a soft murmur in Sarah's ear. She could only nod, overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her and the magnitude of what was about to happen. Michael moved towards the bar, pouring 2 glasses of champagne. He offered one to Sarah, who took it with trembling hands. "To new beginnings," he toasted, gently clinking his glass against hers. Sarah drank, grateful for the alcohol that began to numb her senses and calm her nerves. Michael watched her with a mixture of desire and something else, something Sarah couldn't decipher. Slowly he approached her, taking the empty glass from her hands and setting it aside. His fingers brushed Sarah's cheek, tracing a path to her neck. "You're beautiful," he whispered, leaning in to kiss her. The kiss was soft at first, almost tender, but quickly became more intense, more urgent. Sarah let herself be carried away, closing her eyes and trying to lose herself in the sensation, to forget why she was really there. Michael's hands roamed her body, awakening sensations that Sarah had never experienced. Part of her wanted to let go, to surrender to the passion of the moment, but another part, the part that remembered her principles, her dreams, screamed silently. When Michael began to unbutton her dress, reality hit Sarah, hard. Silent tears began to run down her cheeks and a sob escaped her lips. Michael stopped immediately, stepping back as if he had been burned. "Sarah," he asked, his voice filled with concern, "are you okay?" Sarah shook her head, unable to speak. Sobs shook her body as she hugged herself, feeling more vulnerable and exposed than ever. Michael looked at her, and for the first time that night, he seemed to really see the young woman in front of him, not the fantasy he had built in his mind, but a scared and desperate girl, forced by circumstances to consider something she clearly didn't want. A heavy silence filled the room as Michael struggled with his own inner demons. Finally, with a deep sigh, he approached Sarah and, with a gentleness that contrasted with his previous behavior, wrapped her in a soft blanket he took from the sofa. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice broken with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. This is wrong. I can't do it." Sarah looked at him through her tears, confused and relieved at the same time. "But the money," she managed to say between sobs. Michael shook his head. "The money doesn't matter. I can't buy your innocence, your dignity. I was wrong to even suggest it." He moved away from her, walking towards the window. The city glowed beneath them, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the room. When Michael turned back to Sarah, his eyes were full of regret and shame. "I've been so lonely," he confessed, "so empty inside, that I thought I could fill that void with this. But seeing you like this, so scared and vulnerable, has made me realize how wrong I was." Sarah, still trembling, sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in the blanket as if it were a protective shield. "What's going to happen now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Michael ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with his thoughts. "I'll help you," he said finally. "Not in this way, but I'll help you. No one should be forced to consider selling their body out of desperation." He approached his jacket and took out his wallet. He extracted several large denomination bills and placed them on the nightstand. "This should be enough to cover your rent and expenses for a while. No conditions, no expectations." Sarah looked at the money, her eyes wide with surprise. "I can't accept it," she said, shaking her head. "Please do it," Michael insisted. "Consider it my way of making amends for tonight, for putting you in this situation. Use it to take care of yourself and your sister while you find a more permanent solution." Something in the sincerity of his voice convinced Sarah. With trembling hands, she took the money and put it in her purse. "Thank you," she murmured, not knowing what else to say. Michael nodded, then took a business card from his wallet and handed it to Sarah. "If you ever need help, any kind of help, call me. I promise I'll answer." Sarah took the card, looking at it for a moment before putting it away with the money. She stood up, still wrapped in the blanket, suddenly feeling uncomfortable and out of place in the luxurious room. "I should go," she said, moving towards the door. Michael didn't try to stop her. "Of course. Do you want me to call a taxi for you?" Sarah shook her head. "No, "Thank you. I think I need to walk, clear my head." When she reached the door, she stopped and turned to Michael. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you change your mind?" Michael looked at her, his eyes full of a mixture of emotions that Sarah couldn't fully decipher. "Because you reminded me that there's still some humanity left in me," he responded softly. "And that's something priceless." With a final exchange of glances, Sarah left the room, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts and remorse. As she descended in the elevator, Sarah felt as if she were waking from a strange and turbulent dream. Emotions hit her in waves: relief, shame, confusion, gratitude. The weight of the money in her purse was a constant reminder of how close she had come to crossing a line she wasn't sure she could come back from. As she left the hotel, the cold night air hit her, helping to clear her mind. She began to walk aimlessly, letting the streets of Chicago guide her as she tried to process everything that had happened. Had she done the right thing by accepting the money? What would she tell Lisa, and what did this encounter mean for her future? As she walked, Sarah couldn't help but think about Michael. How he had changed in a matter of moments, going from being a predator to an unexpected protector. Was it possible that there was kindness, even in the darkest situations? With these questions spinning in her mind, Sarah headed home, knowing that this night had changed her life forever, though she still didn't fully understand how. The days following that fateful night were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. The money Michael had given her temporarily solved their most urgent financial problems, allowing her to pay the overdue rent and fill the refrigerator with food they hadn't seen in months. However, the peace of mind this provided was overshadowed by a feeling of guilt and confusion that wouldn't leave her. Lisa, seeing the sudden change in their situation, was quick to ask questions. "Where did you get all this money, Sarah?" she asked one night. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Sarah hesitated, the weight of the lie heavy on her. A customer at the diner gave me a very generous tip," she finally responded, avoiding her sister's inquisitive gaze. Lisa observed her for a moment, clearly unconvinced, but decided not to push further. "Well, whatever it is, at least we can breathe easy for a while," she said, turning her attention back to the television, but tranquility was elusive for Sarah. Each night as she closed her eyes, she relived the moments in that hotel room. Michael's touch, the fear, the shame, and then that unexpected turn towards compassion. She constantly wondered what would have happened if he hadn't stopped, if she had gone through with the original plan. Would she have lost herself in the process? Work at the diner became a refuge, a routine that anchored her to reality while her mind wandered. But even there, she couldn't completely escape her thoughts. Every businessman who entered reminded her of Michael, and she found herself searching for his face in the crowd, though she didn't know if she did so with hope or fear. One afternoon, while cleaning a table, a customer dropped his business card. As she picked it up, Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. It was identical to the one Michael had given her that night. For a moment she thought about calling him, seeking what? Closure, explanations, or something else she didn't even dare to name. Finally, she put the card in her pocket, along with Michael's, promising herself she would never use it. Meanwhile, in his luxurious apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, Michael Harrison struggled with his own demons. The image of Sarah, vulnerable and frightened, haunted him. He had immersed himself in work, trying to drown out the memories and remorse in long hours at the office and risky business decisions. One night, sitting alone in his study, Michael took out his phone and looked at Sarah's number, which he had saved from the information she gave him that night. His finger hovered over the call button, the temptation to hear her voice, to make sure she was okay, almost overwhelming. But what right did he have to burst into her life again? Hadn't he already caused her enough trauma? With a frustrated sigh, Michael tossed the phone onto the sofa and poured himself a glass of whiskey. As he looked at the city lights through the window, he wondered if he could ever redeem himself for what he had almost done. Days turned into weeks, and although life on the surface seemed to have returned to normal for Sarah, something fundamental had changed within her. She no longer saw the world with the same innocence she had glimpsed a dark side of life, but had also witnessed how compassion could emerge in the most unexpected places. One afternoon, while walking home, after her shift, Sarah stopped in front of a local university. She looked at the imposing buildings, the students coming and going with books under their arms, and felt a pang of longing. Was it possible that she too could aspire to something like this? The money she had left from Michael, could it be the start of a different path? With a determination she hadn't felt in a long time, Sarah entered the campus. She headed to the admissions office and, with her heart beating strongly, asked about the requirements to apply. As she listened to the kind receptionist explain the details, Sarah felt a spark of hope ignite within her. Maybe, just maybe, that terrible night had been the catalyst for something better. Perhaps from the ashes of that experience, a brighter future could emerge. As she left the university, Sarah looked up at the Chicago sky. The clouds had cleared, and, for the first time in a long time, she could see a few stars shining faintly above the skyscrapers. She took that as a sign that, no matter how dark the night, there was always a light guiding the way forward. With renewed energy, Sarah headed home, ready to face Lisa and share her new plans. She knew it wouldn't be easy, that the road ahead was full of obstacles, but for the first time in a long time, she felt she had a purpose, a direction. What Sarah didn't know was that while she was taking her first steps towards a new future, fate was preparing another encounter that would shake the foundations of her world. Once again, Michael Harrison, tormented by guilt and a growing desire for redemption, was about to make a decision that would put them back in each other's path. For better or worse, months passed, and Sarah's life underwent a radical change. With determination and ever-widening gap between the sisters, Sarah found herself spending less and less time at home, divided between her studies, her job at the diner, and her new university activities. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Michael Harrison had gone through his own transformation. The encounter with Sarah had awakened something in him, a conscience that had been dormant during years of unbridled ambition and self-imposed loneliness. Driven by a desire for redemption, Michael had begun to get involved in charitable works, focusing especially on organizations that helped young women in vulnerable situations. His philanthropic work had given him a new purpose, but he couldn't get the young woman who had changed his life that night out of his mind. One day, while reviewing reports from one of the charities he supported, Michael froze. Among the photos of volunteers, he saw a familiar face, Sarah. She was smiling, surrounded by other young people clearly involved in some kind of community project. Without thinking twice, Michael picked up his phone and dialed the organization's number. "I need to know more about your volunteer program," he said, his heart beating fast. That same afternoon, Sarah was at the community center, helping organize a food drive. She was so focused on her task that she didn't notice the tall, elegant figure that entered the room until she heard a familiar voice. "Hello, Sarah." She froze, her heart skipping a beat. Slowly, she turned to find herself face to face with Michael Harrison. "Michael," she whispered, a mix of emotions rushing through her. Surprise, fear, and something else she couldn't name. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice soft but intense. "I needed to know that you were okay, that the money that it really helped you." Sarah looked around, aware of the curious glances from her fellow volunteers. "This isn't the place," she said quietly. "We can talk outside." They left the community center together, walking in silence until they reached a small nearby park. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, creating a surreal backdrop for this unexpected encounter. "What are you doing here, Michael?" Sarah finally asked. Sitting on a bench, Michael sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "As I said, I was looking for you. I've been thinking a lot about you, about what happened that night. I needed to know that you were okay." Sarah looked at him, studying his face. He seemed different from the man she had met that night. There was a softness in his eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "I'm okay," she said softly. "Better than okay. Actually, that money, it changed my life. I'm in college now, studying social work. I want to help other people who are in the situation I was in." Michael smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his face. "I'm glad to hear that. Really glad. I've been trying to do things differently since that night too." He told her about his philanthropic work, about how he had been trying to use his wealth and influence to make a positive difference in the world. As they talked, Sarah felt something change between them. The fear and shame she had associated with Michael began to fade, replaced by growing curiosity and respect. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why have you done all this?" Michael was silent for a moment, looking at the horizon. "Because you made me realize how empty my life was," he finally responded. "I had all the money in the world, but I was willing to hurt an innocent person just to fill a void inside me. When I saw you that night, so scared and vulnerable, it was like seeing myself for the first time in years, and I didn't like what I saw." Sarah nodded, understanding. "That night changed me too," she admitted. "It made me realize that I had to fight for something better, that I couldn't keep being a victim of circumstances." They looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them, two souls who had hit rock bottom and found the strength to get up and redefine themselves. "And now what?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the question. Michael smiled softly. "Now, if you'll allow me, I'd like to get to know you for real. Not like that night, but as two people who are trying to make the world a better place. Maybe we could work together on some charity projects. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people trying to do good." Sarah considered the offer. Part of her wanted to say no to cut all ties with that painful chapter of her life. But another part, a part that grew stronger every day, saw the opportunity to create something positive from an experience that could have destroyed her. "Okay," she finally said, "but on one condition: everything has to be transparent. No secrets, no hidden agendas." Michael nodded solemnly. "You have my word." As they stood up from the bench, preparing to leave, Sarah couldn't help but feel that she was on the brink of something important. She didn't know if it was the beginning of a friendship, a professional partnership, or something more. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future. What neither of them knew was that their reunion had not gone unnoticed. From a distance, hidden behind a tree, Lisa had witnessed the entire scene. Her eyes shone, with a mixture of anger, jealousy, and suspicion. For her, this was confirmation of all her suspicions about the sudden change in Sarah's life. "So, this is your secret, little sister," she muttered to herself, as she watched Sarah and Michael walk away together. "Well, we'll see how long your fairy tale lasts." With a heart full of bitterness, Lisa turned and walked away in the opposite direction, her mind already devising ways to unmask what she perceived as her sister's hypocrisy. Sarah and Michael's reunion had planted the seed of a conflict that would soon threaten to destroy not only the relationship between the sisters, but also the fragile new world that Sarah was building for herself. The following months were a whirlwind of emotions and changes for Sarah. Her collaboration with Michael on various charitable projects opened her eyes to a world of possibilities she had never imagined before together. They worked on support programs for young women in vulnerable situations, created scholarships for low-income students, and established a job training center in one of the most disadvantaged neighborhoods in the city. As they spent time together, Sarah discovered a side of Michael that she never would have imagined on that fateful night at the hotel. He was compassionate, intelligent, and genuinely committed to making the world a better place. Slowly, the initial fear and distrust gave way to a deep friendship and, to the surprise of both, an affection that grew day by day. However, while Sarah flourished in her new life, her relationship with Lisa deteriorated rapidly. Sarah's frequent absences, her new friendships, and her growing confidence were a constant source of conflict between the sisters. One night, after Sarah came home, late again, Lisa exploded. "Who is he, Sarah? Who is that man I've seen you with?" Sarah froze, surprised by the question. "What are you talking about, Lisa?" "Don't lie to me," Lisa hissed, her eyes flashing with fury. "I saw you with him in the park months ago. Tall, elegant, clearly rich. Is he the one who's keeping you? Is that how you pay for college?" The color drained from Sarah's face. "It's not what you think," she said weakly. "Oh, isn't it?" Lisa sneered. "Then enlighten me, little sister, because from where I'm standing it looks like you've been playing the saint while doing exactly the same thing I do. The only difference is you caught a bigger fish." Lisa's words hit Sarah like a slap. "You're wrong," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. He's a friend. We're working together on charity projects. He's helping me help others." Lisa let out a bitter laugh. "Charity projects? Is that what they call it now? Tell me, Sarah, how long after I gave you the advice to find a rich man did it take you to find him? Weeks? Days?" "Enough!" Sarah shouted, tears running down her cheeks. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I've worked hard to get where I am. I've studied. I've made an effort. Yes, Michael helped me at first, but not in the way you think. He saved me that night." The last words came out of her mouth before she could stop them. Lisa looked at her, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What night, Sarah? What are you talking about?" Trapped, Sarah collapsed on the sofa and between sobs told Lisa the whole story. The desperate night, the encounter with Michael, how he had stopped and helped her without asking for anything in return. When she finished, she expected to see understanding in her sister's eyes. Instead, she found a look of contempt that chilled her to the bone. "So you're better than me, huh?" Lisa said, her voice cold as ice. "Little Sarah, so pure and noble, saved by a knight in shining armor. While I crawled the streets to keep us both afloat, you managed to sweet-talk a millionaire. Congratulations, little sister. You've hit the jackpot." "Lisa, please," Sarah pleaded. "It's not like that, I never—" But Lisa had already turned around, heading to her room. "Save your explanations, Sarah. I don't need them anymore. You've made it very clear whose side you're on." The door slammed shut, leaving Sarah alone in the living room, shaking and crying. She felt that her world, so carefully rebuilt in recent months, was crumbling around her. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and dialed Michael's number. When he answered, his worried voice on the other end of the line, Sarah could barely contain a sob. "Michael," she said, her voice broken, "I need to see you. Everything is falling apart. I'm on my way," he replied without hesitation. "Wait for me, Sarah. You're not alone in this." As she waited, Sarah looked around at the small apartment that had been her home for so long. Now it felt like a cage, full of bitter memories and broken dreams. How had she come to this point? How could she fix things with Lisa? What Sarah didn't know was that, in her room, Lisa was making a decision that would change the course of their lives forever. With tears of rage in her eyes, she packed a small suitcase. She couldn't bear to be in the same space as her sister for another minute, the Saint Sarah who had achieved everything Lisa had always dreamed of. When Michael arrived at the apartment, he found Sarah curled up on the sofa, hugged her without a word, offering the comfort she so desperately needed. It was at that moment, in Michael's arms, that Sarah heard the front door open and close. She jumped up, running to Lisa's room, only to find it empty, with drawers open, and her sister's belongings gone. "She's gone," Sarah whispered, the horror of realization hitting her like a wave. "Lisa's gone, and it's my fault." Michael held her as she collapsed, not knowing that this was just the beginning of a storm that threatened to sweep away everything Sarah had built. Lisa's disappearance was only the first act of a drama that would test not only the bond between the sisters, but also the budding relationship between Sarah and Michael, and Sarah's own determination to stay the course of her new life. The days following Lisa's disappearance were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. Guilt, worry, and fear mixed into a toxic cocktail that threatened to consume her. Despite her efforts and Michael's to find Lisa, it seemed that the older sister had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a broken heart. Sarah immersed herself in her studies and volunteer work with an almost frantic intensity, as if she could fill the void left by Lisa with constant activity. Michael remained by her side, offering silent support and understanding, but even he could see that Sarah was on the verge of collapse. It was during this dark period that Sarah began to question everything she had built. Did she really deserve this new life? Had she abandoned Lisa in her pursuit of something better? Doubts gnawed at her, threatening to undo all the progress she had made one night. While working late at the community center, Sarah received a call that would change everything it was. From a hospital on the outskirts of the city, Lisa had been admitted, seriously ill and asking to see her sister. Without thinking twice, Sarah rushed to the hospital, her heart racing frantically. Michael insisted on accompanying her, worried about her emotional state. When they arrived, they found Lisa in a hospital bed, pale and emaciated. The months on the street had taken their toll, and a combination of malnutrition and untreated pneumonia had brought her to the brink of collapse. Seeing her younger sister enter the room, Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah," she whispered in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Sarah ran to the bed, taking Lisa's hand in hers. "No, Lisa. I'm sorry. I should never have hidden anything from you. I should have been honest with you from the beginning." The sisters cried together, years of resentment and misunderstandings melting away in that desperate embrace. Michael remained discreetly in the background, giving the sisters the space they needed to reconcile. When they finally calmed down, Lisa looked at Sarah with tired but clear eyes. "I've been so foolish, Sarah. I was so blinded by jealousy and resentment that I couldn't see how much you had grown, how strong you had become. I lost myself in my own bitterness and almost lost everything." Sarah squeezed her sister's hand. "You're here now. That's what matters. We're going to get through this together, I promise." It was at that moment that Michael stepped forward, clearing his throat softly. Lisa looked at him, recognizing him from the park, and a shadow of shame crossed her face. "Mr. Harrison," she said weakly, I owe you an apology. I misjudged your intentions and my sister's." Michael shook his head, his voice soft and understanding. "There's no need for apologies, Lisa. We've all made mistakes. What's important is that we're here now and that we can help each other heal and grow." In the days and weeks that followed, Sarah divided her time between the hospital, where she cared for Lisa, and her studies and volunteer work. Michael remained a constant and supportive presence, helping in any way he could. As Lisa recovered physically, she also began a process of emotional healing. With the help of Sarah and the hospital therapists, Lisa started to face the traumas and wounds that had led her to make destructive decisions in the past. Sarah, for her part, found a new depth in her social work vocation. The experience with Lisa had shown her firsthand how desperate people could become, and how important it was to extend a helping hand in the darkest moments. When the day finally came for Lisa to be discharged, Sarah surprised her with news that would change their lives. "I've talked to Michael," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. "We've decided to expand our help program. We're going to open a rehabilitation and training center for women who want to leave life on the streets behind, and we want you to be part of this, Lisa. Your experience can help other women find a new path." Lisa looked at her sister, overwhelmed with emotion. "Are you serious? Do you think I could?" "I think you'd be perfect," interrupted Michael, who had been listening from the doorway. "Your perspective is invaluable, Lisa. You could make a real difference in these women's lives." With tears in her eyes, Lisa nodded. Thank you both. I don't know if I deserve it, but I promise I'll do my best." As they left the hospital together, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey her life had been over the past few years, from desperate poverty to hope, from fear to determination, from loneliness to a network of support and love. She looked at Lisa, who was walking beside her, and then at Michael, who was following them with a warm smile, and felt her heart swell with gratitude and love. The future that stretched out before them was full of promises and possibilities, but also challenges. They knew the road wouldn't be easy, that there would be obstacles and difficult moments, but now they had something they lacked before. They had each other, and the strength that comes from knowing that no matter how dark the night, there is always hope for a new dawn. 5 years had passed since that day at the hospital, and the lives of Sarah, Lisa, and Michael had changed in ways none of them could have imagined. The rehabilitation and training center for women, which they had named New Dawn, had become a beacon of hope in the city under the joint direction of Sarah and Lisa. And with Michael's constant support, the center had helped hundreds of women escape situations of abuse and exploitation, offering them not only a safe shelter, but also the tools and confidence to build a new life. Lisa, in particular, had flourished in her role as mentor and counselor. Her own story of struggle and redemption resonated deeply with the women who came to the center, and her empathy and understanding had been fundamental to the program's success. Sarah, for her part, had completed her master's degree in social work and had become a respected voice in the field of rehabilitation and empowerment of women in vulnerable situations. Her articles and lectures inspired others to join the cause, and New Dawn had become a model that other cities sought to replicate. And Michael had found in Sarah and the center's work a reason to live beyond the accumulation of wealth. His relationship with Sarah had blossomed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect, understanding, and a shared desire to make the world a better place. It was a sunny spring afternoon when Sarah gathered everyone in the center's garden for a special announcement. The resident women, staff, Lisa, and Michael gathered, curious to know what news she would bring Sarah. Radiant and with a smile that lit up her entire face, took Michael's hand before addressing everyone. "Family," she began, because that's what they had all become over the years. "I have two wonderful pieces of news to share with you today." A murmur of excitement ran through the crowd. "First," Sarah continued, "I'm pleased to announce that New Dawn has received a major grant that will allow us to expand our services to 3 other cities in the coming year." Applause and cheers filled the air, but Sarah raised a hand, asking for silence with a smile. "And second," she said, squeezing Michael's hand, "Michael and I wanted you to be the first to know we're expecting a baby." The explosion of joy was immediate. Lisa was the first to hug her sister, tears of happiness running down her cheeks. "Oh, Sarah," she whispered, "Mom and Dad would be so proud of you, of us." As the congratulations and hugs continued, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment, from that desperate night on the streets of Chicago to this day, surrounded by love, purpose, and hope. She looked at Michael, whose eyes shone with love and promise, and then at Lisa, whose transformation was a living testimony to the power of second chances. At that moment, Sarah knew with certainty that no matter how dark the path may seem, there is always hope for a new dawn. Her story, Lisa's story, the story of every woman at New Dawn, was proof of that. As the sun began to set over the city, bathing the garden in a golden light, Sarah placed a hand on her belly, where the promise of a new future was growing. With Michael by her side and Lisa nearby, she felt filled with a peace and joy she once thought impossible. This wasn't the end of her story, she realized. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with infinite possibilities and the kind of love that transforms not just individual lives but entire communities. And as night fell gently over Chicago, the lights of New Dawn shone like a beacon, a constant promise that there is always hope, always a chance for redemption, and always the possibility of a new dawn.